What's up, Saviors? GH here. It's another build video time, and for today, it's Onmyoji, Pyromancer, and Elementalist. We're gonna take a look at the classes, their skill set, what changes they may have undergone, the good and the bad, and some of my thoughts at the end of the video. And with that said, let's do this! Okay, here's the build. We got Onmyoji, Pyromancer, and Elementalist. We're gonna start with Onmyoji. Now, Onmyoji is a class that are able to summon divine spirits and use the magic of yin-yang in combat. And the reason this class is here is because one of its skills works with Pyromancer, and that's Firefox Shikigami. Now, this spell summons a fox that increases crit rate of fire elemental attacks, which is the specialty of Pyromancer. Max this one out if you want Pyromancer to hit more critical attacks. Next spell is Genbu Armor. It's a spell that creates a protective barrier that takes away your SP instead of your HP when you're getting hit. There's a new art for this and it's called Possessed. It's just recently added, and what it does is increases psychokinesis attack, non-property attacks, and elemental damage by 20% for 30 minutes. It changes the Genbu buff into a 30-minute buff, and every 20 seconds, the art gives a buff that increases psychokinesis damage by 30%. Then after 20 seconds, it will give an increase of non-property damage by 30%. And after that, it's Earth property. You get the drift, right? Genbu Armor increases the damage of those elements one by one. So if you really want to take advantage of this, you gotta pay attention to the color of the Genbu buff. And as you can see, the red icon over here indicates that it's currently boosting psychokinesis attack. Then next is the blue icon that indicates that it's boosting non-property. Then the brown icon, which is for the earth element. You only need level 1 Genbu Armor if you want to take advantage of this. And if you're not familiar with the elements, Greenwood Shikigami, Toyo, and Storm Dust is earth, and Howling White Tiger is non-property. Next spell is Yin-Yang Harmony. It's a very large area of attack that you need to hold for it to continue attacking. And there's an art for this that makes the area of attack smaller but generates more hits. It's a pretty good art, go take it. Coming up is Toyo. It's another screen-wide area attack that can hit multiple enemies. It's Earth Element. It means you can take advantage of the Genbu Armor buff. Next is Greenwood Shikigami. It's another Earth Elemental attack, but this one summons a tree that pulls nearby enemies. Then, Howling White Tiger. It's a non-property attack that hits multiple targets. It has a variety of attributes that can make it even more useful, like increased damage against beast-type enemies, and the other one, which is it increases movement speed. And there you go, Onmyoji. Right now, it's a pretty decent alternative to Taoist in case you don't want to follow the meta builds. And now let's go on ahead to Pyromancer. And Pyromancer is a class that specializes on fire elemental attacks, and the reason it's here is to provide the much needed area attacks that Pyromancer is known for. And also, Pyro works with both of the classes included in this build. In the recent updates, it received a new art called Napalm, and it's for the spell Hell Breath. Now, Hell Breath is a channeled skill that does continuous flame attack. It's your Yoga Flame. You can point it in whatever direction you want. And while the spell is active, you are immune to melee attacks. And this spell also has a chance to debuff enemies with the Hell Breath debuff that increases fire elemental damage, but it only lasts for about 5 seconds. Now, the arts, it's called Napalm. And what it does is shorten the duration of the channeling of Hell Breath, and it only hits one target. But in exchange, it will hit much more faster. It doesn't increase the damage per hit, it only makes it hit much faster with a shorter duration. So, what do you get from this? What I noticed is, with this art, it can inflict the Hell Breath debuff much more easier. And of course, you get the total damage much more faster. And for those who wants to see a test of the Hell Breath debuff, increased fire damage, here it is. As you can see, Flame Ground only deals 26k damage. And when we debuff the enemy with Hell Breath, it now deals 38k. So it's a significant increase, and it works with all of your fire elemental attacks. So if I were you, after casting all your main elemental attacks, follow it up with Hell Breath to get the most out of your fire elemental attacks. Next spell is Prominence. It's an area attack that summons flames on the ground that roams around, that deals damage if enemies get hit. There's an art for it that changes how it works, and what it does is makes the flames that roams just rotate around you for 30 seconds. It's a pretty good art, go get it. Next spell is Firewall. It's a wall of fire. What do you expect? And yeah, it pushes enemies back when they come in contact with the wall. Now, there's an art for this called Crossfire, and it turns the pattern of the firewall into a cross, and it also doubles the number of hits it does. Another spell is Flame Ground. It's a flame on the ground, it deals continuous damage for 8 seconds, a perfect spell for mobbing, max it out. Another good fire elemental spell is Fire Pillar. Max this one out, it's a fire elemental area attack that deals damage, and combining this with an elementalist spell called Storm Dust doubles the amount of hits it does. And unbeknownst to people, Fire Pillar also does a crowd controlling effect that immobilizes enemies as long as they're inside the Fire Pillar's area of effect. There's a Vibora staff for this called Firebolt that increases the capability of Fire Pillar, and it gives it the ability to drop down meteors. It's kinda expensive for now, it's gonna be cheaper in the future, so watch out for it. And lastly, Enchant Fire. It's a buff that gives you additional property hits, but what's important about this is the attribute that gives it the ability to debuff enemies, and that debuff reduces the fire resistance of enemies. Here's a test for you. There goes the Flame Ground, and now let's debuff that monster. And as you can see, we get an increase of fire elemental damage. And that's it guys, Pyro. It's arguably the most frequently used class in the game right now. And now let's head on to the last class, Elementalist. Now, Elementalist is a class with a myriad of elemental attacks and support capabilities that can make other elemental classes show its true potential. And that's the reason this class is here, to further increase the capability of the classes on this build. More specifically, the Pyromancer class. And Elementalist does that with the use of its attributes. First is Elemental Amplify. To put it simply, it gives the build a 30% chance to increase the damage of the appropriate elemental attacks being used. Then there's Elemental Mastery, Elemental, and what it does is increase the damage of your elemental attacks if you are wearing a staff or a rod. Most likely you're gonna use a staff. Now let's talk about the new arts, and it's called Whirlpool. And it's for the spell Storm Dust, and what it does is shorten the range of the spell, reduce the number of enemy it can hit, and adds 5 more seconds of cooldown. But in exchange, Storm Dust will hit much faster. So don't forget to combine this with Fire Pillar. Next spell is Meteor. It drops a meteor on the selected area to deal damage. Combined with Flame Ground, it will deal extra 5 hits on enemies, but you gotta take the attribute for it to apply. Now, there's an art for this that creates 3 fireballs that rotates around you, and casting Meteor again allows you to throw 1 meteor at a time. A pretty good spell, go take it. Next is Hail. It's a crowd control attack that freezes enemies, and the smaller the enemies are, the higher the damage it will deal. And last spell on this build is Elemental Essence. To put it simply, it increases the damage of your elemental attacks if the target is weak against the element you're using. And that's Elementalist. Still is one of the top tier class in the Wizard class 3. You will never go wrong with this one. And now let's do the good and the bad. Let's start with the bad. And if you haven't realized it yet, this build is not good for boss fighting. The damage is decent but not exactly what you would want to make short work of a single target enemy. Another bad thing is the lack of a true eye frame that can save you from insta-kill attacks. And maybe damage. If you want to maximize damage output, this isn't the build. I suggest you replace Onmyoji with TOS for better damage output. Now for the good stuff. It's excellent when it comes to mobbing. The number 1 most spammed content in the game right now is challenge mode, which is mostly mobbing. All in all, if you want a build that's slightly different from the meta, this is a very good alternative. It's very usable on endgame content. And that's it guys on Onmyoji, Pyro, and Elementalist. What do you think? Have you tried this out? Is this worthwhile to check out? Share to us in the comment section down below. And if you like the video, hit the thumbs up. It would help us decide if we're gonna continue with this kind of videos. And share to help us with the YouTube algorithm. And then subscribe to be part of the Gaming Hardcore family. And as always, this is Gaming Hardcore. See you in the next one.